Welcome back to the channel, you kooks. In today's video, we're going to be showing you how to run wires in your van. This is a very easy and straightforward task to get you motivated to start on the daunting task of 12-volt electrical. But don't worry, we got your back on that. We got more videos coming, and if you want more help on your van conversion, head over to vankooks.com today and sign up for our van conversion masterclass. Alright kooks, let's get into this. Welcome to the wiring module. In this module, we're mainly going to be focusing on running wires for appliances through the van. So you should have your framing and insulation done at this point. And now we're going to work on wiring. So you'll only need a few tools here. I have some wire cutters. I got these at Harbor Freight for about $5, Pittsburgh, and they got a lifetime warranty. So highly recommend just some cheap wire cutters if you're just doing this one time. You don't need anything crazy. You need tape. Tape is good to mark which appliance you're running the wire for. And you need a Sharpie to mark on that tape. And then you'll need wire. So I got 3 different types of wire. It's all stranded copper wire. I have a 12 AWG, a 14 AWG, and a 16 AWG. An AWG is just the gauge of the wire. So we could actually just call it 14 gauge wire, 12 gauge wire. So in this case, I'll tell you which appliances need which gauge. You can never overdo it with the wire gauge, but you can underdo it. I'm going to show you what wire to use for your existing accessories. So let's get into it. So we'll start off with 16 gauge wire. This is great for LED lighting and all your lighting and maybe some small, very low draw accessories. So I like to use 16 gauge for my lights. And I have this black and red wire that's basically fused together. This is very handy. So you don't have to run 2 wires. Instead, you just run this one wire at once. I'll have all the links in the description of the video for what wire I'm using. So first I'm going to start wiring my lights, and I'm just going to walk you through that. Okay, so I got my 16 gauge wire here, and this is going to be for all my lighting. And I'm just going to run my wire to where my lights start. So I'm not going to have a light here. I have a fan. I'm going to have 6 lights that are going to run across the top. So my first light will be here in this compartment. And once the lights are in, there's going to be a daisy chain module to show you how to daisy chain your lights and other appliances, so you can kind of just run one wire and set up multiple appliances. If you're doing that, I wouldn't use 16 gauge. I'd go with a 12. So the van's got some space everywhere, so we can just kind of start running some wires through. So I'm just going to string this through the roof, and you always want to leave a good amount of slack. So I'm just going to let that slack hang pretty well. And then I'm going to run this wire down here, down through here. And then down here is where I'll have my fuse panel. So I'll be wiring all my accessories to this one central location. So that's kind of how you start. You want to decide where you're going to have your fuse panel. And then you're going to run your fuse panel to where you're going to have your accessories. So the lights are going to start here, and I'm just going to run it down into here. So I got my first 16 gauge wire in place. This is going to be my lights. So what I like to do is grab a piece of tape and a Sharpie, and I'm just going to write ceiling lights. And since these lights that I'm installing, they don't need a switch. They're on a tap to turn on. So I will not wire a switch here, but I will be wiring a switch. And that's going to be in a complete own module. So just look for this wiring a switch module. But we'll just tap that tape on here. And then we will just kind of store it away so it's not in the way. And then we will write it as well down by our fuse panel, where all the cords come out to the fuse panel. So next up is a 12-volt fridge, and I'm going to use the 12 gauge wire for the fridge. It's a bit thicker. The fridge does use a little bit more power, so we're going to want a thicker wire there. So it's very simple. The fridge is going to live over here on this end of the van. Like I said, you always leave a good amount of slack. So I'm just going to start over here and I'm just going to run it down. The fridge will be somewhere over here. And if you followed our framing, there's plenty of room behind these walls to run these cords. So I'm just going to run this back behind the wall. Make sure I got ample slack. So we'll bring it down. So I'll just run it down, and I got lots of space here on my walls. And I'm just going to run it down. Move that piece, that's going in later. And then just run it down through here where my fuse box will be. And I'll leave a good amount of slack so I can make sure that if anything changes in my layout, I always have a little bit of space to do that. So then we'll grab the tape and we'll mark this again. So this will say fridge here and at the other end. Next up is the fan, and you can either use 14 or 12 gauge. Since I have a big roll of 12, I'm just going to use 12. The 16 is just a little too thin for the roof fan. So I'm going to have a fan here and a fan just right behind the camera, so I need to wire two. They're both going to go into their own slot on the fuse panel, so each fan will need its own wire. So I'm just going to run this one, and I'm just going to basically walk my spool back and just measure it out. I'm going to go out of frame here for a second. It's going to come down there. And like I said, just give yourself a decent amount of slack. So that looks good. So I'm going to cut it down through here, run it down through the body exactly like I did this, and cut it with enough slack. So I'm going to take my snippers and just cut into it. And that's perfect. And now I'm just going to run it through the body, and I'll have another one. I ran the 12 gauge wire as well for the rear fan, and I'm just using these big cavities this transit van has in it. And the way we frame the van, it leaves you plenty of space to run the wiring behind the wall. So it's been working out great. Now I just have a few more accessories to wire, and then I'm going to wire my AC outlets. Alright, so I'm going to have some upper cabinet lights here under this cabinet here that'll come out about this high. We'll have 3 or 4 lights that will shine over the countertop here. So I'm just going to run a 16 gauge, and I'm going to run it to where my lights will be. I will be wiring for a switch here, and I will show you how I do that here in a second. But for now, I'm going to have the lights just up here on this cabinet. So I'm going to leave some space for them, and then I'm just going to do what I've been doing and run this to the full length back to where the fuse panel is. This is the upper cabinet lighting here, and it's going to be on a switch. I'll say the switch is going to be about right here. So when you're prepping your food on your kitchen countertop, you can hit a switch. So I'm going to pull these apart, and I'm going to run the negative, the black, up to where the cabinet lighting will be. And then I will take this positive and I will put it to probably about here where the switch will be. And then I'm going to take another piece of red wire and run it from where the cabinet lighting will be back down and here into the switch. So basically the switch just cuts on and off the positive lead. So you just need to, at some point, wherever you're having a switch, it's going to need to have a break in your positive lead. So I'll probably just cut this cord and have it hang out for the switch, or I'll just leave a decent amount of slack for the switch here, and then I'll just run another red wire up to the light. And I have diagrams for all this stuff, so if anything's confusing, refer to the diagrams, and then I'll wire the switch later. I'll have a module on wiring this switch so you can see how it's done. And then I just got some 16 gauge wire here. So I'll just put that in where the light will be, like so. And then I'll just run it down here to where the switch will be. And voila, we have our switch. As well as having these upper cabinets here on the switch, I'm also going to have a red LED light that runs the whole van. And I'm going to have that on the switch. Red LED lights are great to have for night accent lights. I love mine in my van, and I highly recommend having one because at night you can turn the red LED light on and still go outside and see the stars, and also it doesn't attract bugs. So I'm going to run that to here, and it's going to be on a double switch here. So I got my 16 gauge wire, and I'm just going to run it once again to full length all the way down to my fuse panel. So it looks like a bit of a rat's nest here, but I got my upper cabinet lights, and then I got my LED light strip here, and then they come down and into their own respective switch spot. So I got a lead in and out of the switch, and then these go all the way back to the battery. And I'm going to show you, I forgot one part. I used plastic conduit, and I'm going to clean all this up. It's going to look nice. At first it's going to look a bit unorganized and crazy, but I'll show you how to clean it all up. I have one more thing to wire, and then I'm going to show you how to clean it up. So I'm going to wire one more piece. It's going to just be an accessory. It's going to be an open-ended wire just because I'm making this van for a client. And if they decide they want to wire a fan or another light or some type of USB charger or whatever have you, this is going to be a cabinet here, and I'm just going to run it down in here for them, and I'm going to leave it open, and we're going to have a module on how to cut, strip, and crimp wires coming up after this. So I'm just going to run one more. I'm just going to run it once again through my favorite cavity here and drop it down through to my fuse panel. So this will be the last thing I wire, and then I'm going to jump into wiring my AC outlets. So now I got my Romex cable, and this is just 3 copper wires for wiring the AC outlets. You can get it at any hardware store. So I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to have a power inverter back here somewhere, and I'm going to have 2 outlets. I'm going to have one for the kitchen, and then I'm going to have one here under a couch for laptops and stuff. And it's pretty simple, straightforward. Just going to kind of run it through like I've been running everything else through, and just pass it all the way through. And I ran out of my plastic conduit, but I'll get more, and this will all look very clean here tomorrow. So just bear with me, guys, and I'll show you how we clean everything up. And then I have some nice wire stripper and cutters to cut this cable here. So when I was doing all my wiring, I ran this auxiliary cord over, and in the night I realized I never ran a cord for my sink pump, and I'm so grateful I ran this auxiliary cord. So running just a cord to the other side of the van could be a very safe thing to do, just in case you forget something. So I'm going to show you how to split the 2 wires. I'm still going to keep the auxiliary cord here in case something else needs to be wired down the road. But I'm going to cut this, and then I'm going to send another 12 gauge wire down through this channel and out, and then I'll wire my sink pump down here. So I'm going to show you kind of how to split a wire. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to cut your wire where you want to send the other wire through. So I got my wire snippers. Just going to cut it. Simple and easy. I'm going to save this because I'm going to use it. All right, so I got my 2 wires. This is going to go to the sink pump. This is going to be my auxiliary accessory wire in case anything else gets wired later. So what you do is you'll pull the wires apart just so you can work with them better. And I got these Pittsburgh wire cutters at Harbor Freight for about, I think, $8 or something. I'll show you how these work, and I'll show you another way to do it. These are pretty cool. Quick, easy strip. And if you want to save $8 in no time. You can get this, and you could just see it's got the gauge, so we're working with 12 gauge. So we'll just slide it in there and pull it. It's not as clean of a strip. You sometimes get some frayed pieces. So we got that. We'll do it to both ends. I'll use the strippers because they're easier and quicker. Okay, so I will marry the two reds together here with the butt connectors, and I gave a decent amount of wire there because you'll need it, because it's kind of hard to shove them in here. Then I'll shove it into this butt connector. You make sure you're getting the wire into the metal. So now I'll take my crimpers and I will crimp. So now I take a heat gun. I got this at Harbor Freight. It was like 15 bucks. It makes your work look really clean. You can use a lighter, but I just like using the heat gun. And then I have these heat shrink butt connectors, and I'll just hit them there. Get that wire nice and tight on there. So I've hit it with the heat shrink, and it's nice and tight now. And now what I'll do is I'll take that lead that I had going from my 12-volt fuse panel to my accessory wire, and now I'll wire in my sink pump cord here, and this will also hang out so I can have 2 cords off of 1 lead wire. So we're basically just splitting a lead wire into 2, and this is handy if you just want to run 1 wire to one side of your van, and then you can break off a bunch off it. Just make sure you use the 12 gauge wire as your lead wire. I stepped down to 16 for my accessory, and then my sink pump's on a 12 gauge. Cut. So we'll strip these 2 wires. This is our lead from the 12-volt fuse panel in. So I got them stripped. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to connect black to black and red to red. Pretty simple. And then I'll crimp them down. So I use this steel tape. It's kind of a specialty tool to run this wire. It's really going to help you in your van build. I'll kind of show you what it looks like. Steel tape. It's like I think it might be used for plumbing and running wires. It works great. It works really great when you're working in these tight cavities. So what I do is I just send it up this hole, and I sent it all the way up to the top, and then I just pull it down, and I pulled it through, and now I crisis averted with my sink pump. So just remember when you're wiring, I should have told you this right off the bat, have a checklist and check every item off. I'm kind of glad I made this mistake, so now you won't make this mistake. I'll grab my crimper tools and I will hit it right there on the edge. So I got the wires ran, and now I'm just crimping these. I'm just using my crimper tool and hitting it on the side where the wire comes in. And I'll explain this more in depth in the wire cutting and crimping module. Okay, so they're nice and crimped. You want to crimp the wire on both sides of the butt connector there. And now we'll take our nice handy Warrior $15 heat gun. So I got them crimped and heat shrinked. I really like these heat shrink wire connectors. So they're all looking nice and tight. I gave them a good tug. They're on there nicely. So I'm just gonna kind of tuck them back in here. I'll get my zip ties going and I'll put some more conduit on those. But now you can see I ran it down and I've got quite a bit of slack for my sink pump to be wired now. So if you are going to jump into other wires, make sure your lead wire is a good thick cable so you can get some decent amperage through there. All right, so I'm daisy chaining all my ceiling lights right now. I just want to show you how I do it. I start by just kind of chaining 2 blacks together in a wire butt connector here. So I do 2 into 1, 2 reds into 1, then my ceiling lights, my LEDs will come out of here and go into that place. And then I'll run the 2 connected wires up over here, and I will do it again here. So I'll do 2 reds, 2 blacks, and I'll leave 2 open spaces for the lights to go in, and I'll do that for every opening. So the daisy chain's complete. I just double up my positive and negatives into a butt connector, then I send them through, and I do it again, and then we'll just run the lighting off of this. So it's just one long continuous chain, and then the black and the red comes through, and I double them here. And I'll have some in-depth modules on this stuff, but this is just kind of showing you what you're going to need to do to wire the van. So you're going to need to do this if you're going to have a chain of lights. And then I come through, and then at the end, I haven't finished yet, but we'll just have a single butt connector at the end, and that'll just go into the lights. So you can see here I've connected the fan. I just got 2 butt connectors. Pay attention, they do this a lot on a lot of these fan products. They do the black on the positive. So just make sure you got your cord set up right. And I got the heat shrink butt connectors. I really highly recommend these heat shrink butt connectors, and using a heat gun, it just gives it a real nice watertight finish, and it looks great, and it keeps that nice seal in there. So I'll show you what they look like. And I got this heat gun at Harbor Freight. It was cheap as chips. Then I just use these. I got a link for Amazon. If you're buying something like this, I would recommend what you really are going to need a lot of in the van are these butt connectors. And then when you start wiring your accessories, you're going to need these end terminals. So make sure you have a decent amount. You will go through a lot of these. And yeah, the van is coming together. We're getting the ceiling on. You can see behind me, we got a few strips already. It looks really nice. It's this Naughty Alder tongue and groove. We use the thinner stuff because you need it to be flexible and work with the van's curves. And I painted it with the shellac. It's looking really nice. And we're really excited with the outcome thus far on the van. I'm using this conduit here, and I'm just cleaning up all the cables. It's gonna look nice and clean. All right, so that wraps it up for the wiring module. To clean everything up at the end, I threw everything into this flex tubing. It's 10-foot pieces. I had to buy 3 of them to wrap the whole van up. So you'll need 3 10-foot pieces, and I used the 3/8 inch for these thinner wires, just the single runs, and then I have the 1/2 inch for these thicker wires here. And you can see once I got everything in the plastic conduit, it really cleaned up that rat nest look, and it's looking clean, and I know where everything is. One thing I would note is you might want to just kind of mark where a lot of your wires are, so when you're attaching your walls, you're not popping nails through the wires, then you're going to have some issues there. So just measure out where your wires are, either mark it with tape or however you want to do it. Take a photo and then mark the measurements. I use tape and measuring tape just to mark where they are. And I'm also going to go through and zip tie everything and just keep it all kind of bunched together so that I have all my wires in one specific area, just to make sure that there's nothing up in the air floating and I puncture through a wire, because that will create a short when you hook everything up. So just make sure those wires are protected. And the insulation's also great because we are in a van and it is moving, and you know, you never know what could happen if this wire's rubbing against this wood over and over and over again. It could damage the insulation. So throwing it in the plastic tubing is just an extra measure to make sure your wires never strip and you don't have any shorts, because once the wire's short, you're gonna lose power and you're gonna blow a fuse. So with all that being said, we're going to have more wiring modules. We're going to talk about stripping wires, hooking up your batteries in parallel and all that. And we'll jump into more wiring modules after we put the walls on. So next, we're going to show you a quick, easy way to install walls in your van. So thank you for attending class today. And the next module is walls and attaching the walls, and we'll show you how we do that. We'll have more videos on how to wire your battery bank and all that fun stuff coming up next. But in the meantime, sign up for the Van Kooks Masterclass. We're working on it now, and we're hoping to have it out soon. So Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys on the flip side.